Hello, welcome to the IP Fabric webinar, talking about how to harness IP Fabric to empower NetBox as your source of truth. Today we're joined by Rich Bibby, a technical advocate at NetBox. First, we'll be talking about NetBox, how NetBox is currently working with IP Fabric and the NetBox ecosystem, and then we'll look at IP Fabric and the integration that we've built together to integrate data discovered by IP Fabric to bootstrap or keep up to date the source of truth in NetBox. So over to you, Rich.
Thank you, Alex. Really excited to be here today to talk about this great integration between these two fantastic tools. Bear with me a second, I will just share my screen. So I'll just start by talking a little bit about NetBox Labs, actually, who we are and what we do. So we make it easier to build and manage complex networks. That's our motto, if you like. We were founded in 2023 in New York, so we're just over a year old now. And we are the commercial steward of NetBox, the open source project. We have a world-class team, which first of all built and led NS1. Some of you may be familiar with NS1 as a DNS company. And so the founders of NetBox Labs came from NS1, and also Jeremy Stretch, who is the founder of the NetBox project. He is obviously firmly part of the team here now at NetBox Labs. And we have some world-class investors, and in the time that we've been up and running as a startup, we have acquired some really great world-class customers also. Just a little quote here to set the scene really about what we're talking about in terms of a network source of truth. So enterprises and organizations that leverage the benefits of centralizing their network information through a source of truth this year will gain a clearer, more comprehensive view of their network. So this was a great quote we saw from Alex Ankers recently. And this was a very recent article about network automation trends in 2024. So you can see it makes the point that having a network source of truth allows you to leverage lots of capabilities there to give you an advantage in terms of more efficient and effective and overall network operations. So what is a network source of truth? So a source of truth defines the intended state of your network, and it represents this as structured data, which means that other systems can interact with it easily and programmatically, as we'll see in a minute or two when Alex demos his plugin. So it should act as a single consistent data set. So what that means is we're not having information about the network stored in separate places like a spreadsheet for IPAM, a spreadsheet for DSIM and things like that. Now, there's a little bit of a mental shift that network engineers need to think about when they're adopting a network source of truth, because it really is a move away from describing a network in the legacy ways of doing it with things like design documents and diagrams. You actually start by defining everything about your network in your source of truth, and in this case, NetBox. So the source of truth becomes the authoritative reference for the network, and the data that's stored in the source of truth then allows you to drive your network automation efforts as well. And this is where NetBox comes into play. So NetBox is your network source of truth. It's your system of record for network management and automation. So we eliminate the spreadsheets with NetBox. We break down those data silos. So previously we talked about having data in different spreadsheets and different files for different parts of the network. Well, we consolidate everything into a single source of truth. It accelerates network automation with things like the REST API, GraphQL interfaces, webhooks, and so on. And these allow really the data to flow in and out of NetBox and interaction with other tools such as IP Fabric. It's usually extensible with custom scripts and things like plugins and custom fields and so on. And it can integrate really easily with other tools in your stack. For example, we recently brought out a new integration with ServiceNow, and we have integrations with all the tools that you're familiar with, like Ansible and, of course, IP Fabric. Everything is in NetBox and everything is correlated. So you can see on the right-hand side, you have a screenshot there of a location, which includes links to all the related objects to that location, which could be both DSIM and IPAM data. NetBox is powered by a massive open source community. These numbers are huge in terms of open source projects, and some of the key ones there are the 14,000 GitHub stars, which means it's hugely loved by networking teams globally. 11,000 plus software commits just shows you the sheer sort of velocity of development of the project as well. So there are new features coming along all the time. Now, with NetBox, there are 3 different offerings. Now, NetBox Labs, as an organization, we offer a couple of options for you over and above the open source NetBox project. So obviously on the left-hand side, you've got the NetBox open source project, which is a hugely widely used network source of truth, and it has a massive and active community and product and ecosystem. Now, in the middle here, we have a brand new product actually called NetBox Enterprise, which has all the capabilities of the open source NetBox, but you can run it on your own infrastructure. So you're not, and this is really for customers that don't want to move to a cloud hosted environment, but want to run NetBox on their own infrastructure. However, they want things like the enterprise grade features. They want the 24/7 support, being able to upgrade with confidence, and also get best practice assistance and be able to learn from the NetBox experts. So access to training resources and things like that that go with it. So that's a brand new product that we're really excited about, just been out for a couple of weeks now. And then on the right hand side, we have NetBox Cloud, which has been around for coming up for 2 years now, has all the capabilities of open source and enterprise, but it's actually our software as a service edition of NetBox, which is fully hosted on NetBox Labs rock solid platform. So it's secure, easy to use and scalable. It's highly customizable in terms of your cloud isolation and redundancy and performance options that you might be looking at. And basically it improves your operational efficiency hugely and reduces your administrative overhead for looking after NetBox to basically zero. So those are the 3 offerings. Now, what we see with our customers that we're talking to all the time is we see them on this journey from a documenter through to an automator with regards to their network documentation. So on the left-hand side, we have people that are coming and they are just moving from, as I say, the old spreadsheets where they've got information scattered around all over the place, and they're consolidating into a single source of truth. And what that means is that they change, their operational processes then change or start with changes to the documentation or to the source of truth. So they're not changing different files here and there, they're making changes in the single source of truth. Then they move on to modeling, which is basically connecting that network data together through the cohesive data models of NetBox, and they're enforcing that consistency. So obviously with the NetBox data model, it defines how you model network information. So that then becomes very, very consistent, which means then that you can start to automate against that information because you've got consistent, accurate network data that you've modeled, and then you can now integrate with your automation tools that basically will then talk to NetBox and say, for example, okay, give me this new information I need to deploy this new VLAN out to a bunch of data center switches. So everything starts from the NetBox then as the source of truth. And we then move on to, I mean, the people that are doing this, been doing this for quite a while and are quite mature there in this approach. They're actually automating to the point that they're doing configuration assurance and network assurance, and then identifying drifts between the actual state that their discovery tools like IP Fabric are observing and their intended state, which has been defined in NetBox. And then lastly, before I hand over to Alex, we have this modern network automation architecture that we talk about. And again, this is based on discussions we've had with lots of our customers. We see NetBox as the source of truth here in the middle. And on the top left-hand corner there, you can see IP Fabric in the observability and assurance space. But if we start on the operations side, bottom left, you can see tools that would interact perhaps with the source of truth. Could be things like ServiceNow for making a change to the network, for example. This might then talk to NetBox to update the intended state, or that could be somebody interacting with the web interface to make a change there. That then would trigger an update to the automation platform, which then queries NetBox and says, hey, I need to make some changes now to the NetBox. Can I have the correct information, please, before I push this change out to the network and deploy it? The network devices top right, then they then get their intended configuration deployed out to them, And then we close the loop really by going back around to where IP Fabric fits in terms of assurance. So IP Fabric is taking snapshots of the data about our network, and then from that data, we can use that to do things like populate NetBox, which Alex is going to show. I'll also check for differences between those two states, so the observed state and the operational state, and then you can then act on that information as well. So you could automatically perhaps rectify information that's drifted from the intended state, or it could even be as simple as notifying somebody in the operations team to say, hey, do you realize there is a difference here? Would you like to do something about it? So that's where both tools fit into this overall reference architecture ecosystem that Alex mentioned. Then on that, I'll hand back to Alex now, and he can take it forward from there.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Rich. So I will share my screen now. And firstly, I'll talk about what IP Fabric is and what we're aiming to achieve with our product. As Rich mentioned, we sit in the observability and assurance space and discover the observed state from the network. The idea is that we log into the devices, we run commands, gather the data, and make sure that data is accessible to users of the network in a fast and easily accessible manner, either via UI or via API, most importantly. Our product, to provide network assurance, first we have to be able to discover different networking vendors. We support many different networking vendors, and we log into many of them via either CLI or API. So CLI on the traditional like Cisco iOS, for example, but API for newer SD-WAN vendors, cloud technologies, etc. We ingest and normalize this data and build it into a network model that allows us to analyze the data and query that network model. But that model can change. Over time, networks change, so we store our model in a snapshot so that you can see over time how the network has changed. And then that's exposed via an API to our UI or third-party applications, in which NetBox would fit here. Awesome. So I will just show my screen. So I'm now showing IP Fabric, and this is what IP Fabric looks like. We have our snapshots that have been discovered. So our day 1 to day 4 in this example. On the dashboard, this is where we show the overall compliance of a network, whether things are configured correctly, if they're not running correctly, if you have duplex mismatches and things like that. The idea is that we have these tables that you can query and get data from immediately. As soon as you do a discovery, you get instant value from being able to see all your devices, no matter what the vendor, in one place, and be able to find information about it, such as routing table, ARP table, but then also see back in time what the ARP table was like 3 weeks ago, for example. We collect a lot of information around different technologies, from layer 2 to routing to things like our network prefixes, all the prefixes that are learned in this network for the different devices. And this is important when we look to synchronize with NetBox, because NetBox has the capability of having prefixes and IP addresses and everything like that. So we can sync this information over and attach IP addresses to interfaces, etc. And we also have more like BGP, but not only that, can we see if we have BGP configured and it's configured correctly. However, we might have devices that got an established BGP neighbor, but the compliance is off because we're not actually receiving any routes from that neighbor. And then to bring it all together, our platform allows you to visualize these networks in a nice manner. So we can visualize all the different layer 2, layer 3 links on a topology, and we'll see how we can bring that into NetBox as well. So everything from connections between sites, different technologies, spanning tree, etc. You can see all that. There's a lot more with IP Fabric, but I won't go into the details. So we'll talk about some areas of the NetBox plugin and why we built it. We wanted to allow our customers that wanted to go on an automation journey to synchronize their network into a source of truth, that source of truth being NetBox. So we allow our customers to do a discovery, and then we can synchronize all the information that we support at the moment on the synchronization to be pushed in. And you can choose what to sync. If you already have things like sites, manufacturers, etc. in NetBox already, you can choose not to sync them, and it will use what's already there. But at the moment, we support everything from sites, manufacturers to prefixes, IPs, and everything in between. So everything to get a device up and running with interfaces and IP addresses, we support at the moment. The second reason is that customers might have NetBox, but it's not up to date, or it might not be as up to date as they would like, and they would like some reconciliation process, or just some process that will show the live status of the network and how it differs from their source of truth. So we allow IP Fabric customers to keep track of their network through snapshots, but allow them to synchronize those changes that have happened in the network to their source of truth. And we have some extra features of the plugin that allows customers to use transform maps to choose what fields they synchronize between the platforms. And also, if there's any table data they want to query from IP Fabric, they can get that as well. And then lastly, they have the ability to bring those site diagrams straight into IP Fabric, which is really helpful. Straight into NetBox without leaving the leaving the NetBox platform. So let's look at some plugin concepts. First, we have sources. Sources define how NetBox will communicate with IP Fabric. This is the same whether you have NetBox Cloud, NetBox On-Prem, NetBox Open Source. You define a source of the communication method. Then there's some ingestion jobs. Once you have defined a source, you define what you want to sync, and we call these ingestion jobs or synchronization jobs. And you define what to sync, what snapshot to sync, and what models to sync. We have transform maps. Transform maps are the capability of choosing the fields, the source fields in IP Fabric and the destination fields in NetBox, how they map, and if you would like to apply custom logic. And we have default transform maps out of the box. And I'll just show you how those work. So an example, this is a screenshot of IP Fabric, and this is a screenshot of NetBox. In IP Fabric, we call a host name a host name. For example, it's a switch host name, etc. It's what we've discovered on the device. However, in NetBox, it's called name, so the fields don't match up. So one-to-one relationship, if you were just to do it based on column names, basically, do not match up. So we need some logic in the middle that will transform it from one column to another, essentially. There is also some more advanced transform maps that can do some more complex things. So for example, when we represent IP addresses in IP Fabric, we show the IP address as just the IP address without any slash notation, and then we show the network it belongs to in a separate field. Now, to create an IP address in NetBox, we need to kind of merge the two. We need to take the IP address from that column on the left, IP address in IP Fabric, and merge it with the kind of the network mask that's in the network column as well in IP Fabric, and that ends up in NetBox as the CIDR. So to do that, we can select, okay, we want a source field, a destination field, and then I can provide some custom logic, a ginger, that basically says if there is a network, split it with the /, get the second half of that split. If not, we'll just put it as a /32. And then we join them together and create the IP address. So it allows you to do some quite complex stuff. And you have access to the Django ORM in the background as well, so you can do lookups, etc. within the Ginger, similar to if you were doing custom custom exports and things like that in NetBox. And then branches. When we do a synchronization, we show all the changes in branches, and then you can choose to kind of merge that branch back into the main database if you would like. Changes are not applied to the database until they're merged in. And that allows us to do a diff as well. We can show the diff between that branch and the current main. Similar to Git, but there's no real process of kind of appending to a branch. It's you create a branch, you either merge it or you don't. If you want to make changes or do another discovery with IP Fabric, you just create another branch. Awesome, let's get into it and see how it's done. So I have a NetBox instance. It's totally blank here, so I'm going for the brownfield network brownfield scenario. I have IP Fabric here with this network that I'm showing on the screen now. So I'm going to add a source. When you install the IP Fabric plugin, whether that be on an open source or in the cloud, you have the ability to add a source in IP Fabric tab. So I'm just going to call this demo. The URL, I'm just going to copy and paste it in here. And then I have an API token as well. So you create that in IP Fabric. It's pretty easy to create a token, etc. I'm going to do SSL verify. That's fine. And then I'm going to create. Now what will happen is that we need to synchronize our snapshots. So IP Fabric has a bunch of snapshots in it. We can see them all here. And we need to know what snapshots live in IP Fabric. So we got 16 snapshots. We can see if they're loaded and unloaded now in IP Fabric in NetBox. So we can see everything from the day one that relates to this day one here. It shows all the sites here. And again, we show the sites in NetBox as well. When we synchronize the snapshots, it allows us to get a few things. Allows us to know what sites are in the snapshot, etc. It doesn't synchronize the whole data. It just gives us some key information about what sites are discovered, how many devices, etc. Once the snapshots are in, we can now create an ingestion. So let's create an ingestion. I'm going to call this demo as well. I'm going to select the source. So this is where IP Fabric, the IP Fabric NetBox plugin, you can have multiple sources. So if you have multiple instances of NetBox, of IP Fabric in the NetBox plugin, you can synchronize from different ones. We can snapshot, choose a snapshot. So I'm going to select day one, for example, just the oldest snapshot. I can select a site, or if I leave it blank, it'll do everything. Then I can choose what to synchronize. So I can select all, or just DSIM, or just IPAM. Going to select all and then tick all the boxes that are non-default. So prefixes, IP addresses, VLANs, things like that. You can choose to schedule this synchronization every day or whenever the IP Fabric snapshot occurs, or you can get it to fire on a webhook. And there's auto merge. I won't do that now because I want to show the results, but I'll leave these by default at the moment. Once you've created this job, now you can do a synchronization like an ingestion, and we press ad hoc ingestion at the top. That'll create a branch. It'll pop up automatically in the UI. And now we can see that all the information is being synchronized into NetBox. Now what it'll do is every few seconds the UI will update on the progress of the devices. Depending on the number of devices in the network, it depends how long the ingestion might take. So it could take a little bit. This network's pretty small. It's got a few 40 something devices, but there's a lot of interfaces in the network which can cause it to take a little bit. So we can see here in the logs, if there's any issues, logs will show the issues. And again, it will show key statistics like how many interfaces were collected. So we've got 655 interfaces collected. And then the progress bars at the top kind of show the overall state.
Just while we're waiting for that, Alex, I think, yeah, I mean, from a NetBox perspective and a NetBox user's perspective, this functionality is fantastic, because what a lot of people see is, they start out with an empty NetBox and it's like, okay, I have a brownfield network with all these devices in it. how do I start? How do I get that information into NetBox in the first place to then allow me to then, move on to further down that journey, to automating it from starting out with accurate data from a source of truth. So this is a fantastic time saver for people in that sort of situation, isn't it?
It is, and it's accurate. No longer you're relying on spreadsheets to input the data. It's actually what IP Fabric has discovered. Maybe it might have been an hour ago or whenever, which is pretty good. So it can be quite accurate, especially if you're looking to use that data to start automating in some capacity. So the ingestion's finished now. Everything's 100%, and we can see at the top there's changes in the statistics. It shows things that have been created, updated, deleted. So we can see there's 1,100 changes, created items that's happening. If you go to changes, it will show you we are creating a site. It shows you the data that's going to create a site. For example, manufacturer, we're going to create a manufacturer, device, etc., device role, everything from interface to IP address, etc. Won't go through all of them. There's 23 pages, but this is where you see the detailed changes of what's occurring. And if there is a change that's been updated, for example, you'll be able to see like a pre and post, and I'll try and show that in a minute. So I'll check again, NetBox, if I just open a new, go to sites, there is no sites in here. So if I go back and press merge, that'll start a merge job. That'll merge all that data into the main NetBox database. So that should be completed. It's just synchronizing still.
Obviously, you can choose to not synchronize all of that, can't you? You can be selective at that point if there was certain information you didn't want to import, as you said.
No, actually, there isn't.
Oh.
And the reason
Cut that bit out.
it's a good question. But the reason being is because NetBox is a relationship database. For example, if you only choose to synchronize device, but the site doesn't exist, you will cause errors. So there's like a hierarchy of items that need to be committed in certain orders. So not at the moment, but I think it's a good thing to talk about. So yeah, we'll keep it in. I think it's quite good. But we are looking to try and address that. It's a quite complex problem. Okay. So if I go to organizations now and site, I can see all my sites. I can see site 1 users. I've got 11 devices on that site. And if we go to IP Fabric, go to sites, I go to users, I can see 11 devices in IP Fabric too. These are all the devices. We've created L3 switch role, firewall role, etc. They're all active, different vendors. We've got some Cisco, we've got some Arista, some Juniper in here as well. And we can go there, and this Juniper, for example, because his serial numbers populated, interfaces, all the interfaces are configured. If they have interface descriptions, they're configured. And again, if they have IP addresses configured, it's also populated. So if we go to the IPAM section, we can see our prefixes. So we've got some /32s in there. We've got some /30s. We've got some 24s in there as well, with a small amount of usage, but there is some in there, a small amount of IPs. And note we're only synchronizing IP addresses attached to interfaces. We've got VRFs being synchronized, and we've also got VLANs. So is there any VLANs on there? That's good. So there's some additional functionality in the plugin. So if we go to sites, for example, you can go to the button in the top right hand side that says IP Fabric topology and select last snapshot, for example, and that will pull the topology from the last snapshot. There's a bit of a UI error there, but because it's quite a big site. There we go. So we can see here when we bring the topology in, we can see it in IP Fabric, and if you want to, you can choose to open it in IP Fabric, which will then open the URL in IP Fabric, so you can then move, navigate, change, and swap things as well. And that's the same for any site. You could do that that's been synchronized. So if we look at the MPLS core, for example, I can go and look at that previous snapshot. We can see the MPLS core, it's got some links in between. And then if you want more detailed view, open in IP Fabric.
Yeah, that's a really nice feature there to be able to visualize the networks within
Yeah.
NetBox as well as IP Fabric. Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic.
And then, and how we're keeping track of that is that we have custom fields on the site. So we just, when we do a synchronization, we say update the custom field with the last snapshot and the source it was synchronized from, and that allows the button to know how to fetch the data and what source to bring it from. Because obviously we can have multiple sources. The next feature is the ability to pull information from tables. So instead of going to IP Fabric to see the routing table, I can go and say, get the data from, I don't know, the previous snapshot. And you could get the routing, you could get BGP, ISIS, where routes IPv4. And I can press fetch. What this will do is go to IP Fabric, get the routing table about that device, and see all that in IP Fabric without having to leave the platform. To get that in IP Fabric is pretty simple. Just you could go to devices, select a device, and then routes. It's essentially the same thing. But you could do it for any table without leaving the platform. You could go to BGP. Hopefully we've got some BGP neighbors on this device. There we go. We can see all the BGP neighbors without having to leave the platform, which is great. And then, of course, if the network changes, how is it represented? So I'll just go back to our ingestion. I'm just going to change the source. And hopefully there's a change. I've not planned this. So we'll see. And we'll just leave that in the background to run a little bit. So it's currently synchronizing. That'll take a minute or so to run. So during the process, it will use the transform maps, which are defined in here. I can find it. There we go. So we got a IP address transform map, VLAN transform map, role transform map, and you can create and change them. By default, you've got a few in there already. But essentially, what we will do is try and look up if the device already exists. For example, in device, we try and find a match on the serial number. For example, if you don't have all the serial numbers in there, you can say, instead of doing the lookup via serial number, do it via hostname. If your host names are unique. In IP Fabric, we don't classify host names as unique. It's always a serial number, so we do by default, we're doing it based on serial number. And then you can go in and change things. We have some ginger in some of them are more advanced, or we do have relationship maps if you need to create custom relationships.
Got it. So people can just get started there with the default transform map. So Alex, is that right? So they don't need to necessarily be concerned about that, but the point is that it is customizable if people want to.
Yeah, definitely. We have calls every week with some of our customers that maybe want to synchronize different data from IP Fabric into NetBox, or maybe we don't support a field and we add a new field into the options. We're always changing it or updating our default. So on new installations, customers have it, or if they want to restore our default, you can restore the default one. Even if you've chopped and changed it, you can of reset to default by selecting the restore button.
That's useful. Yeah.
Yeah, it is quite useful. If I go back to this branch now, we'll see. So we've got in the sync we've just done, there's 29 new changes, but 131 updates. So we can see here there's updates to interfaces where an MTU has changed, for example. this is a situation where the MTU has changed from a accepting jumbo packets to then being changed to MTU, and this is to fix a routing problem on the network identified via IP Fabric, where I go in here, there is two links that are kind of dual homed to the service provider, and there's an issue on this bottom one where the MTUs are different. So I can bring up an MTU check. We can see there's mismatch MTU between these two devices. This one's yellow. So this one was 1500, the other one 9192. And that was causing OSPF to have an adjacency problem. We can see in the snapshot, we fix that. So if we go up a snapshot, we fix the problem and OSPF is fully formed and the MTU has changed. And we can see that change is being reflected now in NetBox. So someone's changed the MTU, so the MTU is being reflected in NetBox. And then you can choose to sync that, etc. So yeah, that's a quick overview of the IP Fabric plugin. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in chat, etc. What I will show is that if you fancy having a go at any of this, you can learn more about the plugin via our solution brief, or go to the IP Fabric URL at the top there, which will take you to more information. There's a free 90-day trial for any webinar users, viewers that want to test out IP Fabric and the plugin. And there's also a 14-day free trial of NetBox Cloud. So yeah, if you sign up to those, you'll be able to basically get going and be able to do this yourselves with your own network.
Fantastic.
Anything to add, Rich?
No, I think you've covered it really well there, Alex. Yeah, that was a really great demo of what is a great plugin. I think, from a NetBox perspective, it's a really powerful plugin. I think being able to onboard brownfield networks, but also being able to do the assurance as well, and see what's changed in a network as you demonstrated, is really, really powerful stuff. And yeah, I would encourage anyone that's interested in getting started with the with the plugin and NetBox Cloud to check out these links, and go from there. Fantastic.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone that has joined to watch the webinar, and thank you for Rich from NetBox Labs for joining me.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.